Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and much appreciated you guys swinging by and checking the video out today. Really appreciate that. Guys, got a good one for you today. We're going to be talking about the fall transition in bass fishing, and I really wanted to take some time and explain to you guys what it is, sort of how it unfolds a little bit, how it affects the bass, and how you can use it to your advantage as far as determining the right technique on how to catch fish. So we're going to get into that, everything into that in today's video. Also, guys, just wanted to extend a big thank you out there. Really appreciate everybody that's been helping support the channel by using all the links that I put in the description. All you guys that are doing that, you guys are the reason we're on YouTube here. So much appreciation from me and my family go your way. And also, I'd like to invite everybody to please hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling. It's free and easy. You can unsubscribe anytime you want. It's also a good way to support the channel. So really appreciate all that. Okay, guys, the fall transition in fishing. Excuse me, one of the things in bass fishing that I really have tried to do since I started, fishing years ago is to sort of become a student of the fish and sort of understand their movements and their behavior, seasonal patterns, and all that type of stuff, which is probably some of the most boring part of fishing. It's like when I start talking about, bass behavior and movements, a lot of people tune out because it requires a little bit of effort. But if you want to really step up your fishing to a higher level without the aid of using a cheater box, and just you want to catch your fish by real bass fishing, you got to develop this understanding of the seasonal transitions that fish go through. Now, in my opinion, out of all the year, as far as every single month of the year, there is no more radical or obvious change in the fish movement and personality than in the fall time of the year. I think the fall transition is probably the most pronounced time of the year where you see a lot of different stuff changing. There's a lot of different reasons for that. I mean, you've got normally, you don't have much rain in the fall, so your water levels are dropping. Daylight hours are getting shorter every day. You're rapidly losing your daylight hours. The angle of the sun is changing. You're having cooler nighttime temperatures. A lot of different factors take place, that, cause bass to act in a certain way. Now, what I want to do is I want to sort of run you through this, how the transition occurs and what you can do with that. But the first thing that I think everybody needs to realize is that bass are not victims of their environment. And what I mean by that is when you talk about bass being at a certain location at a certain month of the year, there's a little bit of truth to that, and there's a myth behind it. Because let me give you a prime example. If you have say you've got a secondary point back in a creek that's got a nice drop off on the secondary point, and say there's a big lay down tree on this point where the tree comes off the bank, and maybe the end of the tree is in 10 or 15 feet of water, so this tree is next to deep water. A piece of cover like this on a point, bass are going to use this 12 months out of the year. There's going to be a bass there in February, March, April, May, every month of the year. So it's not like bass are just moving constantly, and they're going to be in one place one month and not in another place in another time of month. If you got some premium cover, you'll be able to catch fish there 12 months out of the year. Prime example is on Table Rock Lake here where I fish all the time. There's a couple like channel banks where there's like a bluffy type bank that drops off sharply into deeper water. I literally catch fish there every month of the year. I can go there in January with a finesse jig or a jerkbait and catch fish. I can go there in February and March, throw crankbait there and catch fish. I can take a shaky head there in April and catch fish. I can go with the top water in May and catch fish. I can, back off with a football head jig in the warmer months. It's literally, there's fish living on this bank 12 months out of the year. So when you're talking in terms of bass movement and fall transitions, it's more about the mood and the personality and what the bass prefer on certain type of structures. It's not necessarily that bass move to different type of areas, because throughout the course of the year, you got bass that are living in all different water depths. Even in cold water, you have a population of the bass that live in 5 foot of water or less when it's cold. You got a population of the bass that are suspended all the time. They're living in deep water. they're all over the place. So you sort of have to, when you're determining this fall transition and how you want to approach it, it's not necessarily that you're going to change your areas that much, but you're going to change your techniques within those areas. So let me give you guys a prime example of what I'm talking about in a fall transition. And then I'll give you some examples of techniques. Normally what happens is that in the early part of fall, the thermoclines in a lake start to break up a little bit. And when these thermoclines start to break up, you have bass dispersing more in different water column and depth levels. In other words, if you have a thermocline in the summertime of the year, you're going to have some poor oxygen contents in deep water. That means you're not going to have as many bass really deep. And as those thermoclines break up, the bass are going to be able to move deeper. They're also going to be able to suspend, and they're going to be able to use any depth that they want. So when fall rolls around, September and October, you can literally have bass in 2 foot of water or in 60 foot of water, depending upon your water clarities. Now, the depth that the fish are going to be in the fall time of the year are relative to 2 different things: your water clarity and your sunlight and your light intensity conditions. That's going to determine the depth of your fish. And as fall goes on, like you start to get into October, November, and December, and I do consider December still fall fishing, because one of the things I've noticed that we've noticed with part of the byproduct of climate change is our seasons are extended longer. Because like right now, guys, we're in the middle of October, and we still got water temperatures in the mid to upper 70s here in Missouri. So that's an anomaly that's occurring every year, that's making these mood and personality and locations of the bass a little bit different. But anyway, as October, November rolls around, the bass start moving shallower for the most part, and they start feeding a little bit more actively on reaction baits. And then this transition takes place until the point where that water temperature starts to drop into the 50s. Now, once it starts dropping to the 50s, especially like the low to mid 50s, then you see a transition of these fish sort of more into a winter pattern. So on a practical level, what I want to talk about is not necessarily the specifics of these transitions that they go through between September, October, November, December, but how you can approach your techniques within this fall transition. This is the most important thing. Now, let me go back again to that channel bank that I was talking about down at Table Rock Lake that I catch them all the time. Say, for example, in late summer or early fall, like September, I can go down that channel bank, and it's like I might be able to catch them, like on a, little crankbait by paralleling those rocky banks, or maybe sometimes throwing a jig on it. Now, as the fall transition rolls around, those fish are still on that particular piece of cover, but they're going to react differently to different lures. So as that water temperature drops down into the 60s and closer to 70 degrees, one of the things that you're going to notice is the fish, the way that they behave and the baits that they, react to are a lot more reaction baits. Now, a crankbait is a reaction bait to some extent, depending upon how fast you're reeling it and how you're deflecting it. And, obviously, like a finesse jig is not a reaction bait. But as that water temperature drops down, going back to this channel bank that I fish, one of the things that you're going to notice is that these fish are going to be a lot more aggressive and shallow on horizontally moving lures in that type of area if you don't have cover. One of the biggest things that I can tell you about the fall transition in bass fishing is if you're fishing a bank or a stretch of shoreline that doesn't have any cover on it except for rock or sand or gravel or whatever your bottom composition is, this is the time of year you need to be fishing a fast moving bait. Like burning a spinner bait's really good, burning a lipless crankbait's really good, topwater is excellent, some type of a fast moving topwater. All that depends on your water clarity, obviously, but that is the thing that's going to cause those fish to react more as that water temperature drops in the fall time of the year. And also, as that water temperature drops in the fall time of the year, one of the things that I've noticed in the transitional period during the fall time of the year is bass rely heavily on shade in those non-heavy cover type of areas. So what I'm talking about, there's their windows during the course of the day where you're going to be able to catch these fish in the fall time of the year more than others, and it all revolves around the shade. Go back to that bank again, that channel bank. It's like right off the bat, in the morning, like when you get out there for the first 2 or 3 hours in the morning, there may be a shade line coming out from that bank that runs 5, 10, 15, 20 feet. That is going to be a high percentage time to fish there, because those fish are going to move shallower with that shade line being there, especially if you have a little bit of wind coming in on it, and it's really going to make them conducive to biting those fast reaction type lures. That's probably one of my favorite ways to catch them. You know, if the water is got a little bit of color to it, I may be, fishing some type of a crankbait a little bit faster there. If the water's a little bit cleaner, I'm going to be burning a spinnerbait. And if the water visibility is like, 3.5, 4 feet or clear, I'm going to be fishing a topwater, like a walking topwater, whopper plopper or something like that. It's going to be really, really good. So the main thing about that is just pay close attention to that, the shade, the wind, everything that goes associated with that. Now, if you have cover present, let's say, for example, you got grass beds, or you've got some lay down trees, or you have docks, something along those lines, bass do not want to chase in and around that cover like they do on the bare banks. It's like, let me give you a prime example of this. Is like if you have that same lay down tree that I was talking about on that point at the start of the video, one of the best ways to catch them, like in late summer or the early part of fall when the water's still warm, is to throw some type of like a crankbait or a reaction lure around the edge of those trees there, because the bass may be a little bit more lethargic, water, oxygen levels may be a little bit lower, and a lot of times generating a reaction strike around that piece of heavier cover is going to be the way to catch them. But as that water temperature begins to drop in the 50s and 60s, one of the things you'll notice in the fall transition is that bass will not come out of cover to hit a reaction bait as well as they will if you probe the interior of that cover with a slow bait. So therefore, when I'm around some type of heavier cover, like, docks or grass beds or lily pads, or, lay down trees in the water, that's when I'm going to jig. Jig is probably my favorite slow bait to fish in the fall transition by far. Some type of a natural color for the most part. Depends on water visibility. If the water visibility is under 1.5 feet or so, I'll use a black and blue or black and chartreuse. But other than that, I'm using some type of a more natural color. But the overall gist of the video, guys, I want to make is don't really pay as much attention. You hear people say, "Oh, there's a fall migration. These bass are going to be moving back into the back of the creeks in the fall time of the year, or they're going to be making these big movements." Bass don't move that much. Populations of bass, they set up on certain types of cover, and they pretty much live there their whole lives there. You got some bass that live out in deep water all the time. They may come up and spawn for 2 weeks out of the year, then they're back out in that deep water. And then you have another bass that lives his entire life around a lay down tree in the back of a cove. So bass are like people, they're like personalities. So you're going to be able to catch bass pretty much in and around the same areas all year long. But you do have to adjust your techniques, and you have to the thing that you have to determine during the fall transition is if a bass is in a chasing mood or a non-aggressive, non-chasing mood. Sometimes they can be both a little bit, but normally there's indicators that give you, some type of a clue on what type of lure category that you're going to fish. And a lot of times those lure categories that work better in terms of a reaction bait, a horizontally moving bait, or vertical dropping bait has to do with your weather conditions. In the fall time of the year, one of the good things you can remember is on the low light days, whether it be shade in the morning, if it's sunny, or if you got a cloudy, rainy, windy day, you're going to catch a lot more fish on those horizontally moving reaction baits in the fall time of the year in less than 5 foot of water. And if you have a brighter day, like it is right now, completely clear with not much wind, you're going to have to probe, a little bit slower with slower baits, with the exception of a topwater lure. A topwater lure is one of a paradox in the fall time of the year, because you can catch bass on a topwater in the fall time of the year if it's slick, calm, and sunny, or if it's a little bit windy and cloudy and rainy. Fall time of the year is one of the greatest times of the year to fish a topwater lure, because of the mood and the personality of the bass. It's conducive to having those fish come up on a bait during the fall time. So there's not, the thing about this, if this seems sort of wide ranging, guys, it is wide ranging, because there's no one lake that fits everything that I'm talking about. Every lake is different. Every lake has characteristics that are unique to themselves. So you sort of have to take bits and pieces out of what I said here and try to apply it to the type of water that you're fishing. Because if you fish a lake like Lake Seminole in Georgia, it's a completely different world than if you're back here in my part of the country and you're fishing Bull Shoals Lake, or if you're fishing Grand Lake versus Lake Okeechobee, completely different. But there are some common threads in fishing that you can apply to about every water, and most of the time those common threads are a combination of your water clarity, sunlight condition, time of day, the wind, all those factors there, all those environmental factors will lead you to the technique that you need to be fishing on that particular lake. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out, and we'll talk later.